So as we're getting situated, if you wouldn't mind putting your name and maybe where you're located or anything else you'd love for us to know about you to be connected into the chat so we can all say hi to each other. Thank you for being here together with me, with my team, for this inaugural forum to bring together restorative leaders. And in this space, we're really focused on what are our rights and who are we fighting for within our communities and how do we do this not only strategically or empathetically, compassionately, but also collectively. How are we moving towards these type of actions? And that's what I'm hoping we can walk away with some inspiration and some excitement about, and to continue this work that I know we all are leading in very different spaces. So thank you for being here. If you go to the next slide, please. So here's our agenda for our time together. We are really centering getting to have some conversation, one with beautiful minds, expert leaders who are leading the way and these conversations nationally to be able to talk about what is happening and how do we think about rights, responsibilities, and the ability to act on those and support each other. Then we're going to go into some breakout sessions, and we are randomly assigning people to these. If there's any you'd like to change to, you can let us know. But the goal is to get into some discussion. We have some facilitators and note takers that will be gathering and kind of collecting your thoughts as you're together to think about the application of these ideas and how we're going to come and focus on building more restorative spaces with others. I think I'll speak for myself, but something I feel very passionately about thinking about is how to build restorative spaces with those who are completely on the opposite side of the aisle of what they were trying to get at. How do we teach them even collaboration, right, with each other and with us? So we're going to talk about that. And then in panel two, we're going to kind of bring back the conversations from the small groups into the big space. So with our note takers, we're going to look at what was said, what are some of the astounding ideas that came out of this, and how do we continue, again, this movement of application. So if I have not met you before, my name is Eurowell DeRuin. I am the founder and a consultant with Intersectional Innovations, and my focus is really on bringing restorative, trauma-informed environmental practices and organizational development all together so that when we actually start to get to the point of addressing inequity, power dynamics, broken or harmful systems, we're doing it from a place where we're already supporting and working on the relationships, on the ability to collaborate, and on building new processes like liberatory design to bring people together to do that differently. So I think part of bringing people together to do that differently is spaces like this, right, where we all can shine and share. So thank you for being here. We go to the next slide, Sabrina. The next one. Sorry. So part of setting things up restoratively is having some agreements for how we're showing up together in this space and how we're engaging in community. So I just ask you to engage with these with me. If you have other ideas of circle values that should be here tonight, please add those into the chat. Alessandro, Sabrina, and I are going to gather those and use those to develop this, right? We will create a new adaptation of this circle for the next time we're together. But what I am asking all of us to do as we sit in space is to, one, own our impact. You know, sometimes what our intention was is not what is received, and that we're willing to own that and work through that together. That we are here to learn from, and so in that, value and respect each voice and understand these varied perspectives that we can engage with. Move up, move back, and reflect. This is an accessible way to say that if you are the kind of person who moves up a lot and takes up space and likes to answer quickly, think about stepping back. Or if you've already given an answer, let someone else take up some space. If you are a person who perhaps is softer and doesn't like to take up space or to jump in the middle of a conversation, think about doing that today because we want to learn and hear from you. Focus on clarity, right? If we are clear, we can create trust with each other, we can create understanding. So as you're sharing, share from your own experiences and focus on the clarity of communicating what we're trying to share. And then I ask you all to start with compassion for yourself and others. We are not here for shame and blame. We are here actually to really value and push forward these great ideas and practices that are already happening in our world. So there's no shame or blame for what you may not be doing or what you think you should be doing or how you should be doing it. We are here to all learn and grow together. So thank you again for doing that with me. So again, if you have any other ideas of what you'd like to see on the circle values, please add them in the chat and we will engage them. I just want to note, I think most of you know, because you're engaged in it already with me, that we're creating a gift economy. And in that, what we mean is that as you are listening to speakers, you are looking at the resources that have been shared, you are even reviewing perhaps this later in the date and thinking about what was shared. Go and see where the impact was made for you. Where did the speaker turn on a light bulb for you? Who was it that brought an idea that really sparked something different? And if you feel that and you see that and you're receiving that from people here, that's a great time to go and say thank you and give someone that energetic value that we love to pass around in our world, which is money, and support each other. So this is a way for us to do that. And I thank you again to think about that as you're listening and engaging with everyone. So we're going to have one specific room during breakouts that I just wanted to call out for everyone. It is a wellness space. So as we're having this conversation, if you start to feel uncomfortable, you feel the physical signs of being triggered, if there's something that's coming up for you that maybe just feels overwhelming and you're not ready to continue that conversation, we've created this separate space. Joe will be leading a reflection process called the waterfall reflection, which is really like a grounding and intention setting process. So if you'd like to learn that, or you'd like to just focus on some wellness and restoration for yourself, you can go into this breakout room instead of going into a conversation. And if that's the case, feel free to just let us know this is where you want to go in this main room, and we'll make sure you get there. Sabrina will be driving that for us, so feel free to message her if something comes up for you. Okay, so much ado. We don't need to hear from me now. I'm actually very excited to hear from Ernest Krim, who's here today to really start to set the stage and kind of that intention for what we are talking about. So he is a national thinker and speaker who has taken the harm and atrocities that happened to him and around him and has brought this historical perspective that makes us see that history and the resilience of our culture and our people, whoever that may be for each of us, does not have to be diminishing. It does not have to be kind of making our life smaller, but it actually opens up a world of opportunity for us to understand what has happened before us, how we've gotten to where we are, and what is that strength within ourselves to move forward. I received a copy of his book a couple weeks ago and just read it while I was in Maine, and I have to say, it like enlivened my heart. It gave me that hope again and that remembering of what has happened before me and how I can take that learning experience that is not only just a part of history, but it's a part of myself and you all, and start to think about that in application today. So that is what we want Ernest to share with us from his perspective. And I'm just really grateful and honored that he was willing to join today. So thank you.
Thank you for that gracious introduction. It's a pleasure and honor to be here, y'all. So I'm a former classroom teacher. I got to start how I start my classes. So I got to say what's up to everybody. I hope everybody is doing well. And since we, have a certain amount of time, I gotta check in with y'all, right? So I can't get in with everybody, but I want you to tell me how you're doing in the chat. So we can do this one of two ways, right? Now, when I taught virtually during the pandemic, and if anybody remembers, like that's half a decade ago, which is insane. That was a time I will never forget. As someone who loved teaching because I can interact with my students in person, it flipped how I did everything. So one of the things I did to check in with my kids was like this thumbs up, thumbs down, thumb in the middle type thing, right? But also I understand that not everybody wants to show themselves. So you can also let me know how you're doing in the chat on a scale from 1 to 10, or you can check in and say you in a great mood, good mood, you're decent, or you're just not really feeling good. So those are your options right there. Let me know how y'all feeling today. Right, all right. And I'm looking in the chat as well. I see some flowers, some fives, great moves, some tens, doing good somewhat. Okay, okay. We got a four. All right, six-ish, great with a little anxiety. All right, all right. Let me get ready to share my presentation as everybody shares how they're feeling. So I want to start this, y'all, by expressing this. I think it's important. I was one of those classroom teachers where if something happened outside, I didn't ignore it the next day. If there was a tragedy, we're going to address it in the class. And that wasn't normally a part of the curriculum because in the traditional classroom setting, if you have curriculum, a content, and a deadline, you're supposed to teach to that to get these kids ready for the test. Because truthfully, my obligation as an educator was to increase those reading scores. I was a history teacher in high school. That was the most important thing for them. But if something tragic happened, I always felt the need to address it because I'm teaching people. I'm not teaching objects. So, in case you weren't aware, y'all, it's crazy outside. Let's be real. It's a lot going on right now in the world. You don't have to leave the house to know it. You feel it in the air. You know it when you touch your phone. So I just want to assure you in this moment, as Dr. Gabriel Mate once said, nothing is wrong with you. Something happened to you. And it doesn't matter what your background is in this country. Something has happened to you. You have been impacted by it. But what we want to do is first and foremost realize that the something that happened and the some things that continue is something that impacts us all, but it can also be something we use to make this country, our community, this world a better place because we all feel it. Now, some people are better at hiding it than others, but it's really, really there. So if you have not had anybody tell you today or recently, I see you. I see you. It's the thing on the outside that's the problem. It's not you. Because let's be real, there's a lot of hate that we're witnessing. There's a lot of prejudice, bias, bigotry, xenophobia. And when I was in the classroom, I realized that that was beginning to happen at a higher rate. And what's interesting about my experience is I also became a target of the hate. If you look at this chart right here at the bottom, y'all, US hate crimes are at a new decade high around 2020. And what I thought was profound about this is, for one, we see one of the, well, first off, let's establish that we live in a country that contextually was created within hate. Like this country was created on a foundation of systemic hate, the genocide of indigenous people, the enslavement of African people. So it's even weird to me to highlight what exactly a hate crime is when, yes, we don't have the same instances of perpetual overt violence that we once had, but we have a continual and perpetual system of violence that we all live through. Whether you live in a wealthy suburb or whether you live in an inner city that's redlined like the one I was in, it is all a result of that. But for the case of these statistics, we noticed that these hate crime stats began to go up around the time Obama announced he was running and around the time he was elected. I think that's interesting, '07 and '08. It goes down a little bit. Now, again, these are only based upon what people report, right? So that's a whole nother story. And then they go up again once he leaves office, when Trump first takes office, slightly go down, not by much, and then they go up again around 2020. And if you look at articles now, you see based on the top that they are continuing to increase, particularly in the school setting. So, how do we grapple with that and how do we counter that as a community? Because we are living within a system now that's not just a foundation of faith, but we also live amongst leaders who use that as a bargaining chip to maintain control. So, how can we use these histories to proceed and do better? So, I have to first tell you right now, y'all, trigger warning. Trigger warning. I'm going to share a personal experience to start this that may trigger something that you've experienced before. It may make you feel uneasy, but it's a reality. And it's one of the reasons why I felt compelled to move forward and share my experiences throughout life. And like most things in America, like it's something really trivial that ballooned into something insane. You know, when you really think about the ways in which racism works within our country, it truly is mind-boggling. I was talking to my kids about this the other day, and when you truly talk about some of the things that were done during like the Jim Crow era, it doesn't even sound real. It's yeah, they didn't want black people to drink from a water fountain that they could drink from. Yeah, yeah, they didn't want them to sit in seats. Yep, they didn't want them to. Yep, yeah, they didn't want their kids sitting next to kids from who had different skin tones. Yeah. Like when you truly say that like that, do you realize how yeah, yeah, they, in this country they didn't want people to vote because yeah, they were women. Yeah, they didn't want women to vote. That is what we are grappling with right now, the insanity of it all, but it's a reality for us all based on these social constructs. So on July 30th, 2016, my wife and I were at this event right here at the South Shore Cultural Center on the south side of Chicago. It was a beautiful day. We were both educators and we were counting down the days to which we had to return to work as teachers. We had about 2 weeks, and it was the day before August. So we wanted to enjoy ourselves one last time before we got back in that back to school mode of August with the back to school commercials and everything. But I do have to tell you now that as a history teacher, context is everything. So July 30th, 2016, we're seeing maybe the second mass wave of the Black Lives Matter movement. We're talking Tamir Rice is killed. We're talking Alton Sterling, Philando Castile on Facebook Live. We're talking Mike Brown, Trayvon Martin. We're talking several years before then, Oscar Grant. We're talking Rakia Boyd. We're talking so many other names. We're talking Sandra Bland, who they said just so happened to hang herself in that jail cell. All of this had happened between around 2010 and 2016, particularly within that time frame. And also, too, we have the first campaign season for our current president. So hate was definitely in the air. And I will also tell you, too, when this situation happened to me, it was a couple weeks also before Colin Kaepernick first took a knee. Imagine that, y'all. It's been almost a decade. And I wonder if it was done 9 years later, if anybody would join him or if it would still be controversial. And if our answer to that question is no, no one would join them, yes, it would still be controversial. That's all you need to know about the work we need to do. Towards the end of this event, we began to walk back towards our car because we don't live exactly in Chicago anymore. So if you ever been to Chicago, you understand that at any moment in time, there's going to be traffic. So we're leaving a little bit early, but then something catches my eye, and it's a game called Cornhole. And this game was open, and it's normally not open at cookouts like this. Now, this was a majority black function, y'all. You could probably count the white people on one hand. So this was something that for us felt like community, especially considering everything that was going on. And of course, it was on the south side, which is majority black. So we go over there and we notice that the open beanbag game only had one beanbag, but the group next to us had a variety of them. Now there's loud music blaring from the speakers. We're not immediately in the area where the music is playing, but we can still hear it. So even if you wanted to talk to somebody in that type of environment, you would have to be face to face with them. So we're thinking, well, maybe we just won't be able to play how we want to, but then something happens. That group next to us throws one of their bean bags extremely far. Nobody goes to grab it after a few moments. So then me and my wife are looking at each other like, well, they got about 15 already, so maybe they're not going to really miss this one. The music is blasting. We're over here isolated by ourselves in this grassy area. My wife goes to grab the bean bag, and then just like that, everything changed. Two white people, two black people. That's the group demographics. One white woman from that group, who was about our age as well, comes towards us aggressively, like power walking, as if she had a bone to pick, as if we stole something that she brought to the function. She begins to scream at us at an extremely high volume, so much that we couldn't even hear the music anymore. She's screaming at us about the beanbag and saying that we should have just asked to play. I immediately took offense to it. So now we're screaming back and forth, and I'm essentially saying, you're not getting this bag back. You're being completely ridiculous. From that point, she got so frustrated that she begins to call us the N word. It would appear that it was about the beanbag, but again, y'all, it's not about the water fountain, right? It's not about the seat on the bus. It's about wanting to feel as if you are superior. So she begins to call us that word. At the same time, she's calling the cops over. Now, contextually, remember what I said, what was going on in the country and what was going on. She's calling over cops who are there armed. Now I'm thinking, what is about to happen? What's going on? And to make matters worse, she does the unexpected. As she begins to walk away as if she was about to leave, she turns back towards us and she spits. Trigger warning, y'all. I want you to think about how you would feel in this moment. What you call me? Say it again. She knocked my phone. So if I hit her, what happens to me? What happens to me? What happens to me? Phone out my hand, calling me a. Y'all gonna let the. What type of people are y'all? You don't know me, man. We don't bother. You're acting like a. You act. Keep saying it. And what did you call my wife? Give me your name too. Give me your name. Give me. What you call me? Say it again. After I show that, I always like to give people some time to kind of just sit with it, especially when it's virtual and I can't necessarily see how everybody takes it. So I just want to give people some time to take that in because especially in this moment, it has hit me recently that that could have just happened, you know? And I could repost this in a completely different on a different algorithm and people will think it just happened. So I want to just let that sit for a moment. And if you want to explain how you feel, you don't have to, but if you want to put in the chat how you feel in this moment, feel free. Just looking through a few responses. Mad, sorry it happened. Amazed at what happened, enraged, and can relate, unfortunately. I see you. For all the folks who can relate to this, I see you. I see you. Sober reality. Yeah, disgusted. Yep, yep, yep. I mean, I can't really, at this point, I have no idea how many times I presented about this. It's a lot. But I would say that every time I do share this, I think of it differently. I think of it differently. I've started sharing this in 2017. School started to ask me to share my experience and story with kids. It's like I said, still relevant. Sometimes it still feels fresh. Other times it's as if it's just background noise. But I think with everything that's happening now, also having, my oldest daughter in middle school, knowing about some of the things that happen in middle school, having to speak at schools who have this issue as young as third grade, I can tell you that the unfortunate reality is I'll probably be presenting and sharing this for a very long time. But that does not mean that we don't have the capacity to make it less relevant. I dream of a world in which this would be me explaining something that used to happen on a regular basis. So with that said, how Black history can save your life. Using overlooked historical narratives that are being banned currently, as you know, to counter the challenges of this moment. I say that because now we have to start from this framework, y'all. If I am saying that something can save my life, that means that there has to be something, a force that is fighting me. You understand? There has to be something that is in motion constantly that is attempting to end my life. Now, this is figuratively and literally. Literally, what happens if I respond how I used to respond while she's calling the cops? Right? What happens in that moment if I, to me, take the bait? So that can mean my life literally ends. Or what happens if I don't know myself as I traverse through society as a Black man on the south side of Chicago. I'm a black man. We have the lowest life expectancy in this country, literally. So this is how we do this. And I can, of course, only give you so much in the time I have, but these are some of the most important lessons I've extracted from my experience and from the book. The first thing we have to really reflect on, and again, this is going to be a lot deeper than just me showing this. We got to really reflect in this moment. Who are you? What is your purpose? And the questions I'm giving you, I could spend a whole class on this right here, but I'm just putting it out there for us to think because I think we really have to dissect this now. What is our collective purpose? Now it's who is our collective? Because are we saying everybody is in the community? Are we saying some are in the community? Are we saying a certain ideology is in the community? We have to talk about these things. And finally, what do we want for all of us? I teach history. I speak about it. I make content about it. But we also have to think about what we take those lessons for as we move forward. That's the most important thing. I don't share this because as some racists will jump in my comments and say, I'm not stuck in the past. Actually, I'm moving forward, but I'm understanding that there are certain things that happen that we have to extract and filter out from that moment so that we can use them moving forward. Because through every time period in our country's history, there were collectives of people that had it figured out. It's just our government never has. So the first thing we have to do, from my perspective, from my studies, from my experiences, we have to affirm ourselves in our community. I put all of these points, these three main points, as affirmative statements, y'all. I will affirm myself in my community. Why is that so important? Because when I opened this presentation, I said, nothing's wrong with you. Something happened to you, and everybody felt it. I ain't even had to see you when I know you felt it. Because the first time I heard that phrase, I felt it. I ain't even first hear from Dr. Gabriel Mateo. I heard that from a black therapist who heard it from another black therapist. Shout out to Resma Menicum in his book, My Grandmother's Hands. I highly recommend y'all buy that book right there. That's who I heard it from. So we take this for granted because most of the affirmation books I know about, I actually, in fact, wrote one there for kids. Most adults think they are a finished product and don't need it. We think that once we leave the toddler stage or infancy, or once we go to middle school or high school, maybe we don't need that anymore. No, you need to tell yourself you're great because you wake up in a country every day where they telling you ain't ish. And things saying it to your face, it's the policies they're implementing. It's the money they're taking away. It's what they're making illegal. It's what they're doing to black and brown bodies, the negligence, the disrespect, the overt way that the law is being ignored. As I grew up on the south side of Chicago, y'all, I learned this firsthand because I grew up in an environment that was very enriching in my community. I would say in some ways it's different from now, of course, because anything pre-social media is going to be different, but there was a strong sense of community. There were gangs, yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on in Chicago at the time, but all of our immediate neighbors knew each other. And even if we fought, we came back together. If I went home after school and didn't have my key, I could stay with a neighbor. If we were missing something from the house while we were cooking, my mom could call on her neighbor. But when I began to go to a white school on the southwest side, something occurred to me. I was being bussed. I didn't know, I didn't have the terms yet, but I realized at the end of the day, I, me and my other black friends were all getting on the bus, but all my white friends are walking home just like that. Like that's the image we had. They're looking at us. They don't know what's going on. The school isn't teaching us that when I started going there in 1993, that 25 years priorly, white parents were protesting, not in the South, but in Chicago against black children going there. They staged a counter protest. They were throwing things at families, throwing things at kids, throwing things at white counter protesters to their counter protests. That's what happened in that community, but they wouldn't even teach you that. Just so happens we're being busted, right? It just so happens we don't live together, right? These are the things that are not affirming me. So if I don't have somebody in my life telling me that I am great and these circumstances do not define me, then what do I become? When I'm in first grade, my first grade teacher would repeatedly call home. This lady would call home and tell my mom that I was bad in school, that I was a bad child, that I did not have any type of respect or whatever. And I just couldn't sit still. I couldn't sit down. And I remember, now, of course, I didn't experience this myself, but my mom would share these stories with me. And as an educator herself, she told me that one day she just completely lost it over the phone. This lady called and told her again how bad her son was. The same child who me, I was always one of the top ones in the class academically. Part of the reason why I got in so much trouble, y'all, was because I always finished my work first. That's what, when educators see Black boys, they don't often see that though. They don't see that maybe this child is rambunctious and doing a lot because one, maybe his intelligence is not suited for sitting down the entire day because that's not normal for a child or anybody really. They see this child fits the stereotype that they have implanted in their mind already. So when you call my mom and say that, if she doesn't have a strong sense of self and sense of who I am as a young man, then she might buy into it. So the first place I have to be affirmed is at my house. My mom in that conversation counters that narrative by suggesting kindly, ever so politely, this book right here by Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu called Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys. And I can tell you from what she told me that that woman never called the house again. If we don't have that affirmation, then what becomes of me? The same child who goes to school every day and only sees white figures, the white president, because that's all we had at that time in the 90s. If I don't also have a house that I go to where I see these images right here, for instance, of Mansa Musa, then I don't know the potential of who I can be. Because then I realize that when I go to school and all we talk about are white male leaders, I know that's counter to what the truth is. Because as America will teach it, y'all, and we have to really watch this, it's more so in this generation about what's not being said explicitly. Because it became less popular and politically correct to use that word in public. So now we have to make sure we are for sure treating them that way. Make sure they don't see themselves as heroic. Make sure that is a fact in school and the fact in the media, as you can see with this statistic right here. Because it's not just the parents who are the first teachers, it's the media, it's the tablets we give them, it's the movies, the TV shows, the YouTube channels. It's not even just you not being present in the image, it's when you're there, you're a sidekick, an accessory, a magic Negro, or as you can see here, you're 13% of the population, but 60% of the gang members, the gangsters, the gangbangers, and the thugs, which speaks to why Ryan Coogler is so powerful in this moment. And no, I haven't seen Sinners yet. Don't be mad. But what he did with Black Panther 1 and 2, the images he showed us, what he did initially with Fruitvale Station with Oscar Grant, he showed who we truly are beyond the person that becomes the hashtag. So it's not just the literal affirmation verbally, it's the visual affirmation. Its Birth of a Nation comes out and leads to a rise of the Klan over 100 years ago. That visual affirmation was for white society to say that you're losing your country. What does that sound like? You're losing your country. You have to reclaim it. I swear the cycles, y'all, are very eerie. This movie led to a rise in membership, a visual affirmation to white supremacy at a point in time when not every European person was even accepted as white. What happens from that? Oscar Macho says, I need to get involved in film. I need to counter that narrative because I understand just how powerful that image is. Frederick Douglass, for instance, became the most photographed person, period, not black man, the most photographed person, period, in the 19th century. Why? Because he wanted to counter that narrative, the minstrel show narrative. Around that same time, who's the most popular black leader? We talking pre-King, pre-X, pre-Rosa. We talking Marcus Garvey. What's the affirmation he said as he grew the United Negro Improvement Association? He said, up, you mighty race, accomplish what you will. Imagine a black man going around the country and raising money to help black people free themselves and go back to Africa, saying that in the midst of Birth of a Nation. More than ever, y'all, we have to make sure that we are set on countering these lies. It starts in our mind. We have to be ready for when things will get better, because things will get better because we're here working on it. But we have to realize that we are worthy of the better that comes. One of the most important affirmations for me, and this is also in my book, is if you don't know who you are, anyone can name you. And if anyone can name you, you answer to anything. That speaks to that. What do we answer to? What do we expect of ourselves? What do we expect of our young people who will one day be in our position? I was reflecting on how when I was a little bit younger, I'm a millennial, everybody was blaming millennials for everything. Like it was all the millennials' fault. For like almost 20 years, it felt like ever since the year 2000, it was millennials, this millennials, that. We eventually, it seems like, all become that old person that blames the younger generation. And what it boils down to is we don't want to take responsibility in the time we're here. So we blame the younger folks for not doing what we never taught them. So what do we do as I begin to wrap up? What do we do, y'all? We affirm ourselves, but then also, too, I always tell people, you got two options in this. There's nuance. I'm a great type of person. There's always nuance, but in this world and where we live in now, you got to choose. Like, we going to agitate or create. We can do both, but you got to figure out your strength. What do you prefer to do? Agitate. You might be the person that works within a system who has access to things, and you agitate within. You might be the person that's better at creating things, right? We talking now. We're looking at Booker T. Washington. He's gonna say create. W.E.B. Du Bois. He's gonna say agitate. Agitate. Malcolm X create. But the reality is, we need both, and we need both in harmony. Shoot, we talking agitate. Yo, what is that? I'm gonna get the numbers wrong, but in 1968, we had black students in the North, not in the South, in New York, protesting against quote unquote Jim Crow at Columbia University. They were planning to build a gym for Columbia University in Harlem, a black neighborhood, and have separate entrances. What did these students do? Student activists and community members united to agitate and ensure it wouldn't happen. They protested. They sat in a week-long campus takeover. This is what they ain't teaching in school. I know because I was in school too. And I know because I taught. We ain't had this in the curriculum. This is what they ain't teaching. These students took control. They wanted to not just do that, but stop the flow of their tuition money being used to commit genocide against the Vietnamese people. I promise y'all, you can't make this up. It's like we're in cycles right now. We're in cycles. In October of 1963, over 200,000 CPS students and parents, mainly students, walked out, sat out, and marched and protested against underfunded schools and segregation, mainly underfunded schools and segregation. My parents lived in this. When schools got too crowded, they didn't decide to improve the conditions. They did not decide to help them go to other schools. They put them in wagons called Willis wagons. They were mobile homes attached to the schools. They took control. They took power. This ain't in the curriculum because that's what we need to know. Agitate. We can create too because now more than ever, what's the excuse? Back then you had to have a building. Now get a Zoom link and create your own school. Hamilton Day School was the first African American private school in Chicago, founded in 1946 by three Chicago public school teachers. All they did was combine their names. They sat on the bus and talked about, we got to do something about it. I'm sorry I could not find an original picture of them, but I felt I needed to show y'all something. Something. Don't that picture look real? I needed to show y'all something about them that represented these beautiful black women. I don't know why I couldn't find a picture. But however, they put their skills together. And their school, their small private school, was outperforming white schools in the state too. Agitate, create, y'all. We agitate, create. Who on your team is going to do what? And where do we start? We can start at the front. We can start at the top. But I say start at the grassroots level and build your way up. Build political power at the grassroots level first. Or have somebody who focuses on the federal level. Have somebody that focuses on the state level. Have a friend that focuses on the county level, the city level, and you do the neighborhood and the school board level. Agitate, create. Junot Diaz once said, what makes this hope radical, because we need radical hope in this moment, y'all, is that it is directed toward a future goodness that transcends the current ability to understand what it is. Radical hope is not so much something you have, but something you practice. It demands flexibility, openness, and imaginative excellence. Radical hope is our best weapon against despair, even when despair seems justifiable. It makes the survival of the end of your world possible. Our radical hope could have imagined people like us into, I'm sorry, I'm saying it again, only radical hope could have imagined people like us into existence. And I believe that it will help us create a better, more loving future. If you agree, let me know in the chat, y'all. Give me something in the chat with that right there. We need radical hope. We know the days look dark. We know it looks grim, but we have to have, if we have a choice to make, as long as we are here, as long as we are breathing and looking and talking and here in this moment and being as humans, we have to make a choice. And that affirmation, that agitation of creation can't become a thing unless you have radical hope that it can happen. Because if ever I feel like this is the worst possible thing, all I have to do is just really remember what it was like 200 years ago for people here. And if they had not continued to agitate and create, then we might still be fighting against slavery. Understand, slavery ended because of a war, not because people said, you know what, this is wrong. And they fought to keep it for the next 100 years. And what are they fighting for right now, y'all? What are they fighting for right now? So we affirm, we agitate and create. And I'm going to leave y'all with this, y'all. We have to seek joy intentionally. I'm going to show a couple seconds of this because I got to get off here, but I just want y'all to see what I mean by seeking joy intentionally.
I'm about to frolic. Oh my God. I'm frolicking. And tell me we was frolicking. What? Oh, we frolicking? That's what we do? We frolicking? Let me get my frolic on. Oh. God, I know we was out here frolicking. We frolicking, huh? We frolicking. The frolic on.
I wish I could just show that on a loop. I remember coming across that when I first got on TikTok a few years back. The amazing thing about TikTok, even though I have so many complaints about it, is that it allows us, as long as we can get through that algorithm, to counter these narratives, right? So what I mean by seek joy intentionally is in this moment, if you are here, you already engaged in this fight, but you have to remember to help yourself. You have to remember to love and laugh and enjoy where you are in this moment and enjoy this creation. Like sometimes I just go outside at night and just look up and look at the stars, right? It gives me radical hope. It makes me realize that all of the things that are an issue here, it's because we created it as human beings. This does not have to be the way. When I say black men have the lowest life expectancy, the black suicide rate is going up amongst our kids more than any other group, y'all. That is a product of a design that is intentional. That is not what it's supposed to be. So when we take the time to take care of ourselves, that could include taking naps during the day. I've started doing that a little bit more. Taking breaks from social media. I've started to do that a little bit more. Taking weeks off at a time. Starting my days with some stand-up comedy because I got to laugh before I cry that day. Go outside and exercise. And you know what? We should listen to our toddlers. If you got toddlers, what do they do all day? They play. They take a nap. They eat snacks and they laugh all the time. And if that's too much for you to grapple with, just remember that Rosa Parks, our great Queen Rosa Parks, who lived a long life, and she was very, very stressed out, of course, through different durations of her life, to the point where she was almost homeless. She began to practice yoga. She practiced self-care. So we got to fight. We got to believe in ourselves, but we also have to set aside time for ourselves. Otherwise, we won't be here.
I'm about to frolic,
y'all. Thank you for listening. This is how we use Black history to counter the struggles of today. Affirm ourselves, agitate, create, and find joy.
Please feel free to unmute yourself and give some love. Share it in the chat. Thank you, Erna.
Yes.
Great job.
Ernest.
Thank you.
Great job. Great job.
Awesome. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you, Ernest.
Thanks, y'all. I appreciate it.
I'm inspired to go frolicking right now. I want to go put my feet on grass and frolic right now.
That's part of my presentation. I knew it. I knew it. I couldn't wait to.
You know, we need to get we need to like encourage that to become a new cycle of updated videos. I have to say, I don't do social media, everyone, but I appreciate when you all bring these kind of beautiful things to us because I miss them. So I skip it. It makes me sad a lot, but thank you. Well, everyone, I feel like this was such a beautiful kickoff. I hope you are feeling the inspiration, the hope, the joy, and also the point of us being here, right? Are we agitating? Are we creating? And how are we doing that together? And what we're going to now do is hear from each other, talk a little bit more about how this is happening in different spaces. With panel one, I'm going to quickly tell you who's on the panel because I want us to spend time hearing from them. So please remember that you can go into that packet. Maybe we can reshare that packet again where you can see all the speakers today. You can participate in the gift economy and thank them for what you learned from them and what they bring to your life in this moment and in your thinking outside of today. But we're going to really focus on the conversation. And the first panel, really the point is to kind of demystify and take abstract ideas like our constitutional rights and start to think about them in the application of our actual lives and in our communities and what is happening in this moment, in our lived experience, and to the people that we care about, if not to ourselves. So I want to thank Siobhan, Jarrett, Damon, Tanya, Olivia, Carol, and Eugenia for being here today. And I'm excited to get in discussion with you. I just welcome each of you. I'll pose a question and anyone can jump in and we'll all just kind of practice that move up, move back circle agreement that, if you've taken up some space, leave some for someone else. And please be brave and jump in and share with us. We are excited to hear. All right. Are we good, Sabrina? Are we showing anything on the screen? I wasn't sure.
I am in the process of
Okay.
pinning everybody, so thank
Oh,
you for
thank you. I know it
the
takes a
patience.
minute. Thank you. She's pinning all of our panelists so we can focus on them. So thank you for that. Well, as we work on that tech issue in the background, we'll just start into the first question. So diving right in, what is one constitutional right that is often not realized for individuals or communities that is transformative and we could use in protecting ourselves and our community? What is something that we can hear today that will bring us some of that confidence or understanding? And I welcome anyone who'd like to start this conversation.
I can add something that I've just been kind of thinking about. I honestly, I think it's voting, right? Not to sound trite, but I think far too often people don't vote. And one of the things I would encourage everybody to look into, um, there is somebody at my door. Look into is being part of most city, state, and local governments have commissions that you can be part of. And most of those commissions have a public seat. And it is typically like an application process. And so, what impacts you more than anything else you're going to do is your city and local commissions. Those are the ones that are deciding what books are being read at the school, what books are being read at school, what is the stop and frisk policy of the police. It might even be the oversight commission for the police, etc. So that is something that I would really encourage people to look into. You can go to your state website and look up commissions, and then you can see like city, county, statewide commissions where you could serve as a public member. And so that is a great way. I mean, I think we were talking about, incite or create. That is a great way to be at the table and truly having the opportunity to make change.
I will
Okay.
also add to that we have the right to organize.
Hmm.
And organizing is a tool that I had many community members. I worked with about 12 ethnicities for many years. And the one thing that amazed me from different people from different countries was that in their countries they didn't have the right to organize. They were criminalized for that. So that is something that I'm happy that we live in a country that we have the right and we should use it fully. Thank you.
Yeah, that's so true. And when people understand that they have the right to come together for mutual support and a shared purpose, it really unlocks possibility. And that can be both in our communities and in our workspaces as well. And while we often think of protest as what comes to mind when we think about our right to assemble, think about that, it also protects the right to build things like affinity groups in your workplace or community coalitions. It also protects the right to, share ideas, even when they are uncomfortable topics that are involved. And I very much have seen that in the partnerships and collaborations that I've been a part of. So I've seen it both externally and internally within these organizations and across their communities. And so at the end of the day, like these internal or these initial gatherings, they can be deeply transformative when they are protected and encouraged rather than feared or restricted.
I think to add to that and to really combine what of our other panelists are saying is that those things work hand in hand, right? Oftentimes we're voting because we're trying to tell folks, hey, we don't like this, or we actually do want this. I think we forget, right? You need the meeting before to assemble so that you know what the plan of action is, so that when you're going to go vote, that you actually are having something that's going to have a collective impact. And so how do we make sure that folks are understanding how do you actually properly assemble and organize so that when you go to cast this ballot, you have organized to an outcome that is the need of that community.
Yeah, I think that was exactly when I was making notes for this. That was what I had, the right to vote and the right to assemble peacefully. And I think for me, particularly in the current climate, one of the things that's been most restorative, in addition to informative, has been the sort of coalitions that have been meeting since before the election, but also after the election, monthly, the Civil Rights Forward listserv, which literally weekly sends out multiple email messages of here are the diversity, equity, and inclusion related articles. This morning I got a message about here's a briefing on the First Amendment that's going to be happening for not-for-profit leaders. And it's not that didn't happen before the election, but for the first time, I've been doing diversity and civil rights work for close to 30 years. This is the most consistent and the most diverse of the coalitions that I've ever seen work together, right? When the National Urban League comes together and brings 40 civil rights groups and they all go around the table and introduce themselves and talk about what their particular identities are and what their particular, who they represent, I think to me, that's been one of the most, people always say to me, what's bringing you hope in the current climate? That is, right? That there's once a month, there's this meeting, that I'm connected to all these civil rights groups, that I'm not a lawyer, although I think people think a lot of diversity practitioners are lawyers. I'm not a lawyer. However, I am being updated by lawyers and civil rights lawyers around what's happening so that I don't have to interpret it. And then I can then pass that information along to my clients. So I completely agree, Siobhan. I think is that to me, those two go hand in hand.
And I like to add that when I invite community to organize, I had to be very upfront with them about the risk and the wedges that happen while trying to organize. There's going to be people that are going to try to divide you. And I tell the community members, when they're like, we want to do this and that, but we're afraid. And I tell them it's okay to be afraid. And you made the choice to do what makes you feel safe in whatever other ways. You just give them a lot of choices of how they can participate in organizing. Sometimes it's just being on the phone, making calls. Sometimes it's like getting letters sent. They don't have to know your name, but you're still organizing. And another thing that I, tell them, retaliation. We need to be ready to, retaliation is very hard to prove. So if you're organizing and someone is going to retaliate against you or your community, you need to be ready to prove that they retaliated against you. So it's on you to document what you're doing, how you're doing it, and what happened. Like keep a log. So if something happens, it's more likely that you're going to get help from somebody. Sometimes it's a lawyer, but you need to have very good proof that you got retaliated. So organizing retaliation, what feels safe and what is not, those are conversations that are necessary when we're talking about using your right to organize.
Is there anyone else who wanted to share before we move ahead?
Hey, oh,
Go ahead, Jared.
hi. Yeah, I mean, so I do a lot of work with men and boys, largely with who have experienced trafficking, exploitation, various forms of violence. And so it's kind of just when I first hear this question, kind of what comes to my mind is sorry, I don't know if you can hear New York outside. There's a loud siren. Sorry. Is the right to equal protection. Is like a lot of times, boys are not taught. It's not normalized that they too can be vulnerable to exploitation and violence. And this of course cuts directly across, lines of race and class and gender. I'm reminded a lot of what Ernest said in his keynote. We found across the board in our research that schools across the board misidentify boys. They often will see hyperactive behavior. They'll see energy, and they'll see that as a threat, and that kind of starts this school to prison pipeline. So I mean, that's something that kind of is, I think, really jumps out at me. Is oftentimes people don't. There's a lot of invisible vulnerability groups that kind of feel that this isn't yours to report, or this isn't your thing, or it makes you less of a man if you report that you were vulnerable. So yeah, that's kind of where my mind went with this first question.
Thank you, Eugenia. I didn't mean to cut you off earlier. Please jump in.
No, it's totally fine. I was actually waiting because I think I might have to change a little bit the scene here, just because my experience is based in Italy and my, let's say the constitution I refer to is the Italian one. So I was thinking about pretty different background, I would say. But one of the most transformative but often overlooked rights that the Italian constitution has to offer is the principle of, I believe it would translate to principle of subsidiarity, which is the states that, which is basically that the Republic encourages the autonomous initiatives of citizens, both individuals and associations, in carrying out activities that somehow are related to a general interest. And what it translates to, what it comes down to, is that the law recognizes and legally supports citizens' action, which is a clear mandate for bottom-up leadership, community care, and collective agency. And when it comes in the context of intersectional justice, this kind of becomes even more powerful because it supports racialized communities reclaiming public spaces, or LGBTQIA plus groups creating safe, affirming environments outside what could be traditional institutions. And it also gives a legal and political cover to people who are already doing restorative work, like healing, organizing, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I know there's more to add to this. I'm going to push us along a little bit because everything you're saying, Christina, it's sitting with me. You're talking about it's okay to be afraid. I've had this conversation with people a lot lately. Yeah, that right. Like in our fear is energy to move towards movement, right? And rage can be the same thing. But I think it's something that we need to remind each other of more. So thank you for saying that. I want us to see if there's any examples that you can each share with us of you witnessing someone using their legal rights to create ripple effects within their community, to make changes or to start seeing outcomes that are actually desired and creating restorative outcomes versus harm. So any examples you can give us of people engaging those rights to do that?
I have one. When I did community organizing in one of the cities, I did a lot of renters' rights education, and and helped to pass a lot of laws. One of the laws that we passed was around towing, and have proper signage, and you had to take a photo of a car before towing it, and if the owner is there, you had to release the car. It was beautiful. We make those protections based on renters' feedback. And then I organized a building where I told them about their rights because they were getting their cars towed left to right almost every day, harassing mostly Latinos in that building. So we did a lot of, organizing, training, home visits, meetings around that issue, but also other repairs and enforcement around tenant protections. Well, that being said, one night I get a call saying, Christina, um, there is this guy that they're trying to remove their car and he's just like not letting them do it. So they're calling the police. And then the community came and did a human chain saying, you're not going to take this car because we know the law. And they were just they went to the police station. They're like, we know our rights. And they called me and I was like, well, you guys are doing the right thing. I was like, now I had to call a lawyer because I'm not going to leave them alone. But you know what? The beauty of that was that they were released, like they were not taken into custody when they told the police, like, we know our rights. Christina told us our rights. Here is that I told them, have the handout ready because a lot of times the police or they don't know that there is laws that pass, right? So they, after that, I was just like very amazed and proud that the community used their rights. And next day, the city came and painted a different line of where cars could be towed because the manager had painted the line on yellow illegally to have those cars legally be towed. So they had to get into the map and say like, this is not under, it doesn't supposed to be marked yellow. So just from that experience, it's in my heart, and I repeat that story over and over again to tell people that they have the power when they know their rights. Thank you.
I'll go ahead and jump in. Thank you, Christina, for sharing your story. That was really powerful. So one story that I have about when I've seen an individual use their legal rights to create some sort of positive or transformative impact on their community. It occurred during my work with an organization called Strippers United. So I'm a member of Strippers United. I've been a member for the past 5 years or so, just for some context, but it's a nonprofit labor advocacy organization for sex workers and strippers, fighting against the criminalization and stigmatization of sex workers. And when I first got involved with Strippers United, I was primarily getting involved with the legal clinic that we offer, the Know Your Rights trainings that we would run, and the organizing workshops as well. But for this specific story, it was around like 2021, but we had a stripper come to our legal clinic and talk to us about how she had experienced some harassment and racial discrimination at the club that she worked at in Los Angeles. And after she had brought up these issues to her manager at the club, first her hours were cut, then she ends up getting fired, retaliation, and as we continued speaking with her, learning more about her experiences and her background, and learning that other dancers at the club had gone through the same thing where they had been wrongfully terminated. There were many instances of, wage theft and just in general exploitation of the strippers who are working at the club. We began to realize like this was an opportunity to, we no longer had to do something on an individual level. We had an opportunity to create some sort of systemic change that could not only potentially just impact the strippers who were at that club, but just the broader sex work community in general, and to really show that just because this is an industry that faces a ton of stigma, that doesn't mean that you can't exercise the legal rights that you have. So, long story short, we began the processes of putting on a strike. I'm not going to go too much into the details, working with other grassroots organizations to see if they could give us support and resources. Trying to negotiate with the club management, which was unsuccessful. But anyways, we eventually ended up going on a strike outside of the club in Los Angeles. And we were all on the picket line for about 8 months or so. It was pretty much close to a year. And I think we did end up unionizing the club. Sorry, spoiler. But I think the most powerful part of that experience was being surrounded by so many different individuals, not only like sex workers, but also like other advocates, lawyers, law students, people from all backgrounds who would come out to the picket line with us and participate and be there. And I know that maybe it's easy to think about a strike being this like somber, serious event, which it definitely can be, and that's very valid. But at that picket line, it was more like a celebration and like a party. We were like doing karaoke outside the club, and like we had arts and crafts stations set up so people could make their own posters and things like that. And eventually we were able to sit down with the management at the club, negotiate, give them our list of demands, come to an agreement. The club was shut down. And yeah, it ended up, of course, like going to a vote, and the club ended up becoming unionized in, I believe it was like at the end of 2022 or so. So it was like close to a 2-year process, but that whole experience, that was like a unique once in a lifetime experience, and just being able to see how that entire journey started from just one individual being brave enough to speak up about what they had gone through, and that completely snowballing into us being able to help them create institutional change. That was not only for that club, but for like the broader community in general. That was very inspiring and amazing, and I was honored to be a part of it.
Feeling jazzed by these stories, and I saw Melonia, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, talking about the right to strike being another one of these important legal rights that we need to make sure people are aware of. So thank you for like naming that for us in this story as well, Olivia. Is there one more story that we want to share? I'm feeling inspired and excited before we go into talking together more. So is there anything else that you're feeling burning and excited to share from the panel?
I can share a quick one.
Yeah.
For context for folks, I'm a national board member with the NAACP, so I do a lot of work local, state, national. So I feel like I can give you all many examples, but I remember at least my first kind of run in as a I want to say it was like 19. So it was very, very new to me. But we essentially were organizing a protest for the stay of execution for a man named Rodney Reed, who was convicted of a crime, a murder that he didn't commit. And so I remember, right, we were petitioning. There were petitions kind of going all over social media. So there were a lot of celebrities posting it. But ultimately, one of the biggest things as we're talking about the right to strike or the right to protest was organizing folks from across the country to go down to the Austin Capitol and sit outside the Austin Capitol for what I believe was all day, right? Sun up to sundown. And at the end of the result was that he actually did get a stay of execution. So to this day, he's still alive. He's still on death row and still fighting that case. But we're able to utilize that organizing power to be able to continue to use legal efforts to make sure that he could remain breathing. And so it's still an ongoing fight. And that was in 2019 and we're in 2025, right? But to be able to say, one, we could continue to raise money, raise more awareness around it. And I feel like from that, and I feel like with every specifically death row encounter that gets national attention, we get more invigorated around, hey, what does this mean for the death penalty, and gain more awareness and more conversation with that. So then it adds to more legal conversations, which eventually will probably turn into a voting conversation.
Thank you, Siobhan. These examples, I think, are some of the most powerful ways to, like, the actual stories of people putting these rights into action communally, I think, is what is the most inspiring. And I know we are a little short on time, so I don't know if we're going to get to all 4 of our questions today, but I'm hoping we could wrap up with the panel to talk a little bit about neighborhood networks and community building and organizing. In many of these stories and many of these discussions so far, that's come up in one way or another, right? That we are bringing multiple people, partnerships, community members together to create the action. So I'm wondering if we can just kind of end with that. What do you recommend? How do you tell people to start doing this? How do you encourage or even do this on your own terms in your spaces to build those networks?
Okay, this is my favorite question, favorite topic to talk about in life. Because I feel like spaces like this happen all the time. And people leave spaces without action items. And the biggest action item you can take is to take somebody else with you. And so whether that's as an organization, right, or it's somewhere else, right? Like a lot of the organizing I do is with the NAACP, but I'm also a pageant queen. I'm also someone who works in corporate America. I'm someone who owns a business, whatever that looks like. I will find a connection to somebody. Networking is our friend. We always say it's not what you know, it's who you know, although it also needs to be what you know, but look at our nation, but here nor there. But I think it's so important to figure out what those connectivity pieces are, right? Every organization, every person is not going to be a mission alignment or a mission fit to you, but you can find commonality and you can go from there. And so whether it's somebody on this call, right, pick somebody random, you're going to find something in common. Or if there's an organization that you can work with, you're going to find something that works, right? I'm also a member of a D9 sorority. So I know when I'm looking for connectivity, I'm looking at issues, right? I know we're talking about political awareness. We're talking about health and well-being. We're talking about political, whatever that looks like. I can find somebody in what that is. And so I think a big piece of that too is knowing what your values are, because if you know what your values are and what your why is, you will very easily be able to identify the other people to work with. And I think Miss Tanya was talking about a listserv earlier. Find other people that are also in the same network that you can do work together. One of my biggest pet peeves is that we have so many organizations, so many nonprofits, so many people that are trying to do the exact same thing, sometimes in the exact same way, and they will not talk to each other. And it's either will not, cannot because they don't know the other one exists, won't because we're probably being petty, or whatever that looks like, right? There's a number of reasons for why it's not working. But if everybody, and like in theory, right, if everybody could sit down at one table and say, hey, you do this, stay in this lane, and come back with your report, we could get so much further together. But all of that soapbox and spiel to say, find a friend, make a friend, stay connected, and then make sure you're connecting those other friends and actually understanding what your why is, what their why is, and then you'll be able to keep the web together. In my head, it's like organizational LinkedIn, like that's what you should be doing, right?
I guess for me, I combine that question with the question we may not get to about helping people understand that everybody has a role, a potential role. I remember when we took over a building when I was in college, and there was such thoughtful planning around, it was, one of these sort of, if we get arrested, who in fact has family members, et cetera, who can help with lawyers, right? Who has some connection that they can do. And there was literally different things set up of like, okay, there are going to be a bunch of people that are going to enter the building and then go by the exits and entrances. It's a landmark building in the United States, so be aware that anybody can come in. But then there are a group of people outside who were eyes, who were the ones that were looking and feeding information to other people. They were the one bringing food. I think one of the things is I study the civil rights movement and have been fortunate enough to meet some of the leaders in that movement. And I think one of the things that I sometimes think about is similar to what you were just saying, how we sometimes make it about this particular organization versus we. How can we do this in solidarity? I can't do everything, but I can find a role in what I can do. I also think we've made things so complicated. And I think the last couple of years have shown us that so many people feel disenfranchised and disconnected from civic engagement, from civic activity, from being a part of coalitions. And I think some of that's intentional, right? Because then a certain group of people can lead that movement. And so I really believe it's showing people what their gifts and talents are and how they can be helpful. I don't know how many of you have seen, there's a piece that's circulating again on social media about this woman who used to cook for the people in the movement and the civil rights movement, and particularly Dr. King, and how she, like, literally for them was just as much a part of that movement. And we did a historic march from Selma to Montgomery on the 50th anniversary, and there were people who served people as they stopped along the way for those 5 days, right? There were other people who were there to make sure that they sort of had a place to sleep and they gave their house. And I just think we have to be able to say to people, you may not have money, you may not have the same education, you may not have this, but there is something you can do, and not make it seem like it's for an elite group of people to be able to lead a movement, to be able to lead sort of progress moving forward.
I was gonna just say, it's someone had responded, advice for finding groups that are doing the same. I think honestly, you can do LinkedIn. You can think about your church. You can think about your alumni group in your college. You can think about your neighborhood. Perhaps there's an environmental committee, perhaps whatever there might be, as you're talking to your neighbors. Again, I think that community involvement is you have the opportunity to really have an impact on your community versus letting it happen to you. Get engaged in things that you're passionate about. And if you haven't used Meetup, that's a really easy way to see who is doing other things. And even, at work, Raymond and I, in full transparency, we work together. But we have like 10 different, and we've put together 10 different employee resource groups, everything from sustainability to neurodiversity to dealing with grief, so that people can find their community and be able to advocate for each other. So I think as you think about, to what Siobhan said, what you're passionate about, what your value is, you can then start to align that with groups that are doing that, and really put your time, your heart, your talent into work.
Thank you all. I think we covered such a beautiful breadth, I know, in a generalized way of how people can engage and think about their role in a fabric of change, right? In a fabric of community. So thank you. We are a few minutes behind schedule. We're going to get to breakouts now. And the point of this space is for all of us to get together and to talk through some of what we've heard today. How are we applying and what is going on in our own spaces? Maybe you're inspired, maybe you have something to share. So as we go into breakouts, I want to just remind you, I know I mentioned in the beginning that we have 3 spaces for discussing this topic, rights and restoration. And then the 4th breakout room is a wellness space. Joe will be leading it and there to meet with anyone who perhaps wants to learn some grounding and wellness techniques instead of continuing to talk through topics that perhaps are triggering or uncomfortable in this moment. So please let us know if you would prefer to go to the wellness room and hang out and take care of yourself. Otherwise, we'll be putting you in spaces to have some conversation. I think we're about ready. Sabrina, do we need to do anything before we go into breakouts?
You just need to hang tight as I get people situated into your breakout rooms. So maybe this is a good time for you all to get maybe a little bit of water while I get these groups going. Let's see.
Pamela, I just saw your questions about how long breakouts will be. So we need to stop the breakouts at 20 after the hour. So we'll have about 15, 20 minutes to meet together once we get going. Thank you for asking. If you want to grab a drink of water, Sabrina's going to put you in a breakout room. If you haven't gone to a breakout room before, what is going to happen is a little box is going to pop out, or excuse me, pop up on the screen, and then you just select that and it takes you to the room. So if your Zoom screen is large, sometimes that pop-up happens behind it, so you might want to minimize and just see if you can find it, if there's any issues.
Okay.
Should they be receiving the pop-up now?
Yeah.
You'll also get a 60-second warning before the breakout room ends and you come back. So just note that. You'll see that pop up as well when you're in your breakout room.
And then URL and Alessandra, do you want to try to test to join in a room and then
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Sabrina.
cool, no problem.
To be amongst my good people. So I'm very much looking forward to what we can create together. This particular breakout, I know we were randomly assigned, but it is all focused on finding common ground between different community groups that are working on similar issues, building bridges across cultural, generational, social divides. So trying to get people who are different than us to work together, and then developing ways to keep people motivated and prevent burnout, which, I heard some of the careers of the wonderful panelists, and they were quite expansive. So would love to hear you all's secret to longevity in this space, because it can be quite trying. So unfortunately, we don't have time for introductions for everyone, but if you want to share in the chat just a quick introduction while we get started, then that would be great so that we know who we are talking to amongst each other. But
Okay. And I think we can just pass it along to the rest of our group here. Kalina, would you like to go next?
Sure. I am Kalina Morgan. I am the Vice President of Housing Services for Sabathani Community Center out of Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Sorry, Damon, I missed the instructions. Are we just introing ourselves?
Yes, we're just doing
Okay.
intros right now.
Hi,
Mhm.
everyone. I'm Alessandra. I'm with actually Intersectional Innovations, the organizers of today. So it's so good to see faces behind the registrations. I'm excited to have some conversation. And if you need anything, please reach out.
I'll go next. My name is Melania Johnson. My company is Be Smart Coaching. I deliver executive leadership coaching and coachings to managers. I am a trainer, podcast host, speaker, and really happy to be here this evening because this is really beautiful. So thank you. It's been a good evening. Thank you.
I'll go next. My name is Tahisha Timmons. I am the owner of Conscious by Us. It's a coaching and consulting small group. I focus on health equity and healthcare professionals, work with hospitals, publishers in specific on the health equity awareness in their medical documents and clinical education. So we do kind of like sensitivity, DEI sensitivity reviews really of clinical content. So.
May I ask Melania and Tahisha, where are you all from? The area?
I'm in New Jersey near Philadelphia.
Buffalo, New York.
Thank you.
Oh, Pam, there we go.
Do we have everyone? Did everyone go?
Yeah.
I'm interested in knowing, is it Tahisha? I'm from Trenton, so I know that that's very close to Philadelphia. So where exactly are you?
Oh, I'm in Cherry Hill.
Yes, I just wonder. I'm a Jersey girl. I'll be there next month to see my mom. So it's good.
I think they call it what? North Philly? No. North Philly.
We don't call it that, but all right. So I know that we have a set of norms that they're asking us to share. So I'm gonna paste them into the chat so that you all can see them and we can have some shared agreements and see what we would add. So I know when I facilitate, I like to hear voices. So I'll read the first one and then maybe someone else can read the next one. And then towards the end, we could see what we would want to amend or add. So honor diverse experiences. So in this space, we recognize that each person's lived experience is a valid and true for them.
I'll keep us going here. So practice active listening. This is actually an area of opportunity and growth for me right now. So I'm happy to see it here. But when others are speaking, focus on understanding rather than preparing your response.
Acknowledge emotional impact. Some topics may be personally painful. It's okay to step back or take breaks when needed.
I'll do this. This is for me. Share space mindfully. If you tend to speak often, I do. Consider stepping back, and if you tend to stay quiet, consider stepping forward.
So I'll take respect boundaries. No one is obligated to share personal experiences or trauma.
Embrace learning moments. We may make mistakes. Let's address them with compassion rather than shame.
And the last one, maintain privacy. Personal stories shared here, stay here, while lessons learned can be taken forward.
Thank you all. I love hearing our collective voices. And since Damon, you were just on a panel, I hope you don't mind me driving just a little bit and then jump in wherever you want to take on. I want to give you a little bit of a break. I am the introvert, so don't think that I'm trying to take over because I want my voice heard. This is not me and this evening. But I'm so excited to be here and I'm just so moved actually. And so before we even get into the questions that we are asked to ask to you or put forward to you, I just want to know what you're sitting with and what's resonating for you from that panel and from the keynote as a way to see how we're all entering and how we're thinking right now before we go into what we're thinking as far as actions. So hopefully, Alexandra, that's okay to riff a little bit. I just want to see how folks are doing and what's resonating.
Agitator creator. That boom. That's it. I'm like, okay, who am I? Uh-oh, maybe a little both. Let's go.
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, and probably knowing that you don't have to be in either one of those. You depending upon the day or what you're experiencing, you might be a combination of both, maybe one or the other, but it's constantly changing. Absolutely.
I love it. Enter where you are.
Hmm. I'd say what really resonated with me is, as I shared in the chat, is I had read the book, um, the uh, I forgot, but the conspiracy against Black boys when I was a teenager. But and I recognize, and as he said, how his book says about how Black history can save you. That I really think that knowing that and actually implementing that in the way I raised my sons really saved my Black son's life because he was one of those, um, they would call it uh, what's that word? But he was just, in the classroom and he was up and about and moving and he was one that was bored in class. He's done with his work and he's, getting the rest of the class going. And it was, knowing the history and where we've come from and the intent and the intentionality of certain systems toward Black bodies and teaching him that really and being an advocate for him and not allowing him to be labeled that really did help to support him as and who he is as an adult. And I still have one that's 15 now, ninth grade, so still going through it and still, making sure that I'm a voice for them and advocate for them and not allowing these systems to mold them, but to be that place for him, that sanctuary at home, but also to help to identify for him to have an identity in whatever spaces that he enters into.
Thank you for that. I know parental advocacy is so important. And I know the work on our side, because we work with educators, is to mitigate so that our parents and our caregivers don't have to do so much advocacy, that we're thinking with the students at the center. So I appreciate that.
If I could just add one additional thing here is like I am just so incredibly grateful to be in community right now. I think about especially in 2020 and 2021, there were so many of these spaces and so many of these conversations, and they were happening all over the place, and they were so needed. And in many times, like it was the first time that we were feeling seen and heard, and we could really bring our stories and our wisdom into the spaces, into these conversations to unite and really be activated. And over, these past, year or 2 years, these spaces, these conversations are not happening as frequently, or you really have to be intentional in trying to seek them out. And so I'm glad that the conversation is continuing. I'm glad that we're finding ways to come together because there's still a lot of work to do. And collectively, we can get the work done.
Right. And what I appreciate visually about what you just said is that you were smiling while you said it. And so you're so focused on like what you need to do to take action and make community change. But at the same time, I feel the joy. And so I really appreciate just what you're bringing to the space. So thank you.
That one thing, I would also say that my gratitude, actually my friend Taisha, who's on this, invited me today, and I've had to check my own biases in a very short time. I'm very opinionated. Okay, I've had to check myself, right? And at the end of the day, go, oh my goodness, I'm so grateful to hear other voices beside the one inside my head because there's room to grow for every human on the planet. And the change makers that are on this call and are doing this work are about expanding us on a heartfelt and mental level that is really needed for the healing that we need these days and the movement forward. So I want to be real and share that.
I appreciate that vulnerability. I mean, this is a vulnerable space. I mean, I know for me, I'm very similar. I come into this space and I'm like, how much do I share of myself? How much do I give of myself? Do I have to wear this mask that I wear all day in my various spaces? And so it's like the more, and Eurowell does this so well, the organization does it so well. It's just like you just say, I don't need to. And so I just really appreciate that. So thank you for bringing that vulnerability.
Do we want to jump into the first question, guys? We have about 6 minutes left.
Absolutely. She pushed me forward. So it is in the chat. And Damien, maybe you could take this on and I can take the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. So to get things kicked off here, thinking about how can we keep making progress on equality as we are facing pushback as a society?
That's very interesting, and that's been my question all day long in my field. Because I just wanted to know how other people were doing it. So I work in housing and particularly ending homelessness for all of the folks in our country, but particularly in my neck of the woods, Minneapolis. And so what I see in our sector is folks refusing to, give up the work of DEI. We really can't. Um, Fair housing was put into place for a reason. And then therefore, the disparities that we still see can't be ignored. But how do we say that? How do we say that in a grant RFP or in our stance as an agency? My agency is Black, um, completely Black, like Black founded, Black board, majority of our staff Black, and we're unapologetically serving our Black community. Why? Because that's the disparity that we see. Some folks call Minneapolis or Minnesota like the Mississippi of the North because of the great disparities that we see. And so what we're saying is that we protect the DEI through providing or those D or the RFPs or grant writings that we do. We're making sure that what we say in those things is more about the zip code or more about um, the area that the folks are in, as opposed to hey, we're doing, we're focusing our work on Black and brown bodies. And why? Because they're in that zip code. So we can, that's a safe place, to go or a safe thing to write. Although we know in our community that zip code is predominantly African American.
See, I tend to battle that. I feel like that's my struggle right now because we're doing, I apart from working with Earwell, I have an organization that works with boys who are victims of trafficking and exploitation in Thailand. So right there, you have LGBTQIA, you have boys, you have trafficking, you have condoms, you have all the taboo wording right now that is getting us defunded, defunded, defunded. And so a part of me wants to stick it to them and say, you know what, we're going to continue to find funding. We're going to continue to do what we're doing and continue to use the language that irritates you and, triggers you. But that's because that's the real work. And so part of me feels like I'm being a traitor to stop that talking and to stop using that language. But then there's also the part it's like, but who's going to suffer? It's our boys, it's our organization, the people that work for us for 10 years and 15 years and the boys that we're serving. And so it's a really delicate dance that I'm finding myself, and I'm sure so many right now, having to dance. Like, how do we be true to our morals and our values and our conviction while also dancing this ridiculous dance that we find ourselves doing now?
Yes,
Well,
absolutely.
I was going to say, to expand upon that, I mean, there's a lot of that's happening just about DEI in general. So you think about like, oh, now it's called people and culture, or you name it. Like it's this whole transformation, and that's something that I struggle with as well because we're getting so far away of what is the root of this work, then you're kind of doing it a disservice or an injustice as well. And one thing that I invite us to think about, like as this resistance is here, is a reminder that one, it's not new. So oftentimes, if we look at our ancestors, those that have done this work in the past and the resistance that they have faced, there are answers and solutions right there that we can bring forward and then be able to really customize this for current day. And then the second thing I'd like to invite us to consider is that when there is resistance, it's an opportunity to be curious. So if we're even stronger in our resistance, it's not going to allow us to bring others with us. So as we think about, gosh, what is driving that resistance, or for folks feeling like this isn't something for them, and as we start to uncover what's the root cause of that resistance, values start to surface. And then that, Alexander, you talked about values there as well. So now as we're starting to understand values, how do we align the values? And that can be a way to really bring us together.
I I just worry about the loss of the actual language as someone who works with language. The words that are being substituted for the words that were previously used do not mean the same thing if you look at language. And the changing of the language to something that leans towards a more capitalistic view of what of the moral and ethical value of the work that we're doing is a shift. Like that's a schism that do we want to have in this field? So that I struggle deeply with that. Like, are we willing to truly commit and be anti-capitalist and to die for the cause? And many of us come from this as like, this is our source of income. So that puts you in a different mindset overall.
Yeah.
Like, are we truly radical? Are we truly activists? Or is this something else? And DEI has been called for profit. Like that's one of the things that I will say I saw in the privatized industry when DEI kicked off and people started to make money. So I see a duality here. And the loss of the words is very upsetting.
Yeah. I will
and now I'll stop talking.
No, don't stop.
That was lots of
Love
goodness.
it.
Yes,
Love it.
keep bringing it.
Yes.
Yes.
I was just going to add that housing is only one component of our agency. So in the housing field, we've said, okay, these are the things, grant making season that's coming up and all of that. These are the things that we will do for housing. We've not said we're changing anything about our mission, our vision, our language internally. That's who we are, and we can't change that. But in terms of what we know that our housing, and this is only led because of this, what the RFP and the HUDs and all of that they're asking for now, it has shifted to where they were once asking for, what do you do for Black and Brown people? Now they're shifting that because they're shifting that. We're like, wait, what just happened here? And so now we're like, okay, we're going to focus on helping the Black and Brown people continuing in what we do. But your language is now shifting, so where's that at? Okay, well, we're going to make sure that we're in there by saying zip code for housing specifically.
Oh, I think we're getting kicked out, guys.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wish we had more time. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you all.
50 seconds. Thank you, guys. I love the energy.
Thank you.
Enough of this inspired me. Keep
Thank
doing
you.
what you guys are doing.
Thank you all.
Thank
Welcome back, friends. I hope you had a invigorating, uplifting, encouraging conversation with each other. I want to bring that conversation back with us. I think we still have a few more people entering, so we'll wait for everyone to get here. What I was hoping is that as we head into our next panel and get into some more discussion, before we do that, I was hoping that we could have each of the three facilitators from the other rooms, if you feel up to it, just share maybe like a headline of an idea or a conversation that happened in your space that we could all learn from and take away with us. So I'm wondering if any of the three of you would like to jump in, feel free.
I'll go ahead and speak really quickly, and it's one of the
Thank
things
you.
that we just talked about, and I believe Dr. Powell put in there, rest is resistance. And the question that we were referring to is the one about how do we balance addressing today's urgent problems while building for tomorrow. And I think that statement itself is it. I think as we were saying, we just get so inundated with information and things that are happening, and that you're just overloaded. And at that point, you can't even focus on what's happening tomorrow because you're so confined to what just found out today. And then it continues to happen the next day. Now you're focused on this big thing that's happened today. So I do think to the point of rest is also resistance, right? Giving yourself time and grace to like kind of remove yourself, right? And I think as we've probably seen with some of the protests that have been happening recently, where people have been talking about there being a lack of like seeing a lot of Black and brown people at some of these protests, that's a part of resistance as well, right? In a sense, right? Where we have to take our step back, let somebody else go to the foreground, and then we can collectively be doing things on the back end in other ways. So I think that rest as resistance is key to us continuing to have the momentum with the work that we're doing. Thank you, Dr. Powell, for that.
That is amazing. We were literally talking about the exact same thing. And Kalia in our group brought up a really good point, which is that we should hold space for people that may express their burnout in ways that may be socially unacceptable. And so having to support them and make space for it may show up as anger, it may show up as uncomfortable, like being able to help those people go get the rest that they need, and so that they will still be welcomed in the movement. So for our group, I also wanted to share, we were really thinking about how do we get community members to lead meaningful discussions in their own workspaces, community schools, neighborhoods. And we started out by recognizing we all want to be regular degular. Like we're all regular Joes. We don't have to have these power hierarchies where there are the doctors and the experts in the room and the rest of us are on the low end of the power spectrum. So creating these spaces where we get rid of these power hierarchies and just allow people to share their experience is one way that we really empower people to take on the movement, is so that we let them be leaders, let them be the experts in their own experience. And part of that is encouraging people to identify what are those translational skills that we can translate into leadership, into the movement. Like you went and helped handle that issue with your super at your apartment building. How did you do that? And how does that translate to the leadership skills that you need to lead meetings for so and so cause? So I really appreciate our group. We had great conversation. Thank you all.
Damon, can you do ours?
Yes, absolutely. It helps if I get off mute here. So, what I would really like to congratulate and just celebrate from our group is that yes, we had a series of questions, but we paused before we even got into that to immediately model like this is what it means to check in on with others and say, what's happening? How are you? What are you bringing into this space, and how can we be of support in community? So I think it was such a great reminder that we look at our calendars. We have so many things that are out there, and we think we got to do ABC 1, 2, 3 by 8 a.m. But we're all fellow humans having a shared experience. So how do we continue to be intentional in creating the space to slow down, to make sure like we're checking in and know how we can support and bring each other forward. So that really took up a considerable amount of our time together, but it was well worth it. And so that really kind of also led us into we think about so if we are modeling what it means to check in with others and to unite, there's a lot of resistance that's out there. That was our first question. It's like, and with our ability to do that and create community and unite, then we think about that's a great opportunity to be able to be in a space to not combat this resistance on our own. We are much more powerful when we are together. And then we also brought into our conversation to think about as we are navigating this current climate of increased resistance. One, let's remind ourselves this is not new. And two, is that when we have these opportunities of we're faced with resistance, it's a chance to lean into curiosity to better understand what's driving that resistance. That can invite a conversation on values. And as we then are bringing values into the conversation, that can be the illuminated path forward to align values and bring more people with us.
Yay. I love these conversations. I just got back from a week of resting myself. I have not been well, and I've had a couple times this year where I plan monthly downtime in my calendar for the whole year because I know what is coming ahead that I don't know is going to hit me, right? And I need to refresh and be ready to come back into community. Um, and I think that this conversation, I'm guessing most of the people in this room have heard this group, but the NAP ministry work that's been happening for 10, 15 years. I think that there's all these beautiful places already that are usually, at least in my experience, led by Black women that we need to uplift and create room. Like I appreciate so much you're talking about that room for everyone to engage in different ways and space for people to go process in their different ways, right? So that we can get to that grounding and coming back together. So thank you all. This is beautiful. I hope we will have more conversations around this. And I also hope, as we talked about, you will walk away thinking of someone to grab onto from this day to continue these conversations and even to build that accountability of practice, right? Of compassionate care, starting with yourself. Well, we are wrapping up our conversation today, and I thank you all for still being here and hanging out. I know for some of you in the East Coast or in other countries, it is very late or early. So thank you. As we jump into our last panel, I really want to take these conversations with us, and I welcome your responses to start from that space you were just in, not meant necessarily my question, if that's what you're led from. So feel free. What I'm hoping from this panel is just that we can focus on what we kind of ended with last time, which is how do we take these ideas, these theoretical, these feelings, and turn them into the action within our community and spaces? Or how are we already doing that we can share and model? To all of the great points made today, there is no newness under the sun in the sense that these things are already happening. The best practices, in my opinion, have already been experienced historically. So how do we keep doing this? And that's what I want to share, or have you all share with each other. So as we jump into the last discussion, I want to just start with this question for the second panel, which is, how can everyday people, normal individuals who are experiencing the chaos, I think the motion that some of you talked about really well, of every day getting disturbed, right? And have your nervous system upset. How are we as normal people then to support each other in navigating these complex systems and to start thinking about change in our very local community, in our neighborhood, in our schools, in our church? What does that look like? And how have you either led that, experienced it, or can share a story of having seen that?
Okay, I guess I'll start a little bit. So I think
Thank you.
I think one of the most effective ways, I always say that knowledge is power, right? So I think that, even in these spaces, I think educating yourself, right, about what's happening. I think a lot of times we're getting so inundated with information that we're not actually able to dissect what's happening, and we're not really sure about how it's actually impacting our different communities, right? So we're seeing it on more of a macro level versus really looking at the micro level to see like how is it directly impacting what I'm doing. So I think I definitely think that educating, trying to get as much education and as much knowledge as possible. And I think people get kind of I mean, at this point, there's so many resources to have, right? But you have to vet the information to make sure it's correct. So there are aspects of that. But I think that everybody has a particular function in what they are doing. I think everybody has a particular part that they can play. So I think that just knowing that your small part can be a thing that can help to help make change, can help create change. I think that's really the important part. And then also I think, as I believe so many people have mentioned, just getting information from like National Urban League, like getting that information, being able to gather the information and really taking that and seeing what little small parts that you can do in your community. It can be a matter of hosting a little small talk back with everybody. It can be, meeting with your local, officials and having conversations with them. I think people tend to think that we have to do these large aspects of things in order to get things done. And sometimes it just takes making one step to get that information. So I would definitely say, like, especially and take time to rest, right? Taking time, as we said, taking time to rest and really absorb the information without feeling like you have to immediately act. I think taking the time to strategize and plan is really, really imperative, especially in this time where there's so many things that are happening. Taking time to actually sit down, strategize really makes a big difference.
One thing I'll add too is I lovingly say we need feet on the street, but we need people in the boardroom too, or in positions of influence and power. And so, you know, uh, at Aquent, there wasn't a diversity council. It was something that um, when George Floyd's murder happened, I really, I went to as the director of marketing, I went to the leadership team and I said, I think we need to say something. And there was a little bit, we're not really sure. And then I was like, well, okay, great. All of marketing sits under me. So if we're not going to say something, we're going to say nothing. Like we're shutting down email, we're shutting down social, whatever. And so we did end up saying something, and that led to a task force. And then that led to what is now our DEI council. But I am aware and acknowledge that because I was a senior leader in that space, I had the ability to inform and influence some of the decisions that we were making as a company, which then, has led to this council and affinity groups. And again, our leadership sees the benefit because 40% of employees cite the employee resource groups as part of their employee satisfaction. So we've been able to tie it to business outcomes. And so I think that is when you're in a workspace, that is really important to tie these programs and initiatives to business outcomes and show how it impacts what the business is doing. But I think to build off of what Raymond said, wherever you are, you have the ability to inform and influence, even if it's just when someone makes a comment that's, you know, racist or um, they may, I say ignorant, but in the sense of they really may not be aware of the impact to just say, hey, you know what? Like, that's not okay. It's not okay to say that, or you could be hurting someone's feelings. And sometimes we have to do that with older generations, right? They grew up using words that we no longer use. And so sometimes I literally have to say, Mommy with love, like, you can't say that. Like, that's not okay. So I think we all have the ability to inform and influence wherever we are. No place is too small, no place is too big. So you can make the impact. And I love to say, let it be a ripple effect to others.
I love this conversation. There's so many places to go with this, so many levels and layers here. I love the saying, 80% of success is just showing up. And it may seem like, what's the point? Why should I vote? Why should I go down to the community? Why should I go visit the church? Why should I go to the community group? Just show up. And I think it goes back to what Tanya started when she was talking about the small things, cooking the meals, that's a big deal. because it has to happen. We got to eat, and we were talking about that in our group about that. And I think there's another layer here. I want to go back to what Ernest was saying about affirmation. So I think there's a couple of layers or an ancillary benefit here. So if we're showing up first of all, so we feel good. Hey, there's more of us here and all that kind of stuff. But I'm part of this. I have an identity here. I showed up. I am believing in what we're doing. What can I do to help? Am I setting up the chairs? Am I out, with the megaphone? It doesn't matter. I showed up, and I think that's what we're all doing here. We all showed up.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Greg. And to also go off of what Raymond was saying too, is just the idea of showing up, of reaching out in like literally whatever capacity, and being, you don't, I work in higher ed, so we historically have always been like, we have to be in control of all the things. And the answer is no, and we definitely shouldn't be. And so like the idea that like I can like just go and serve the purpose and serve the whatever you're serving in the way that is needed, but it identified by that group or by that community, and acknowledge that it's not, I mean, it doesn't have to look the way that it's always looked. I work in research. Research doesn't have to be like I ask the questions, you give me the answers. It can be whatever people need. And it still is responding to these oppressive systems and has like is shoved into these systems that we're still navigating. But just knowing that that role is so important too, even if you're not in charge, you're not the leader, you are still a part of something, and it means something. And I think it's hard sometimes, like when you're taught like you have to be this big person, like that the small quote part should be fulfilling too. And I think that that's sometimes something that's hard to remember or learn when there's just so much to do. So
Yeah, I just was gonna add, Madeline, that was beautiful. And I'm like, I'm so here on the just like, let just show up train, but it's hard. I feel like for multiple reasons, like I feel like some of the most powerful leaders are the ones who are like oftentimes too worried that they're going to offend someone or hurt someone's feelings or step on toes or like just take up too much space. And like a lot of times it's like, oh, but I want to make sure everyone else has space. And it's like, wait, but you also deserve space and we need you. But I think a lot of times we're struggling with two different things, either imposter syndrome because of probably like oftentimes our own histories of emotional abuse or systemic oppression that have told us that we don't deserve to take up space. Or on the flip side, I want to be mindful of my privilege. And so then I don't want to take up space, but then so I'm not doing anything to help because I'm worried that I'm taking up too much space, but that's also not helping. So it's like navigating, at least even for me on a personal and professional, I feel like I'm always teetering between those two. And then it's like you lose out on all the ways you could help. But I think a big part of it as like an everyday person is just figuring out like your strengths, which you know from being in community or being a family member or a loved one. Um, and then like using them, like bringing them, putting yourself out there. Like I think for me, it's when I was like 22, I just didn't tell anyone because I was like, I have melanin, so you can't tell. So I just never told anyone my age. But I was moving from New York City to like a small town in Louisiana, and I had been doing anti-trafficking work, but briefly. I was young, um, but I was like, I see that no one's doing that work here, but so many people are working with survivors. They just don't know it, or they realize it, figure it out, find out, and then they're like, I can't work with them anymore, and then there's nowhere for them to go. And so I just was like, what can I do? I don't know. I'll just bring people together. So I just like started a coalition and was like, who wants to come? And like totally, unfunded, but turns out later in life, I realized, oh, it was community organizing. And then we created this whole like shift in model where we're actually assessing and addressing and like providing community resources to folks who are typically like just sent it to systems or completely ignored or forgotten. But like really all I did was like, I don't know, I'll just do something. And I'm like, I think I'm good at bringing people together. And then now I think the way that looks is like, I'm a therapist. So what can I do? I'm not right now. My goal is not to run for office. I just finished up the Obama Foundation Leaders Program where they like selected 100 leaders across the US. So cool. All the most like amazing humans, many of whom may run for office. And I'm just like, I don't think right now that's me. But like I'll be your emotional support human because like I specialize in vicarious trauma for lived experience experts who most of us are like system impacted, people. So I'm like, I've got you. So what I can do during this time is create spaces that are at least safer or tailored towards our communities and like empower the people who are doing that policy change work if I don't feel like doing it, or also like it's not fun for me, it's not my jam, or I'm doing it in different ways. So I think it's like figuring that out. And then the last piece I'll say is like on my journey of this, like figuring out where I fit in, it's also tying into who I am as a person. And so I'm Sri Lankan. My family survived the Tamil Sri Lankan genocide, but I was born in the US. So I've been like, I'd love to help, but I have all this privilege as a US born person. And I don't want to come in and be like, I know about this. But I'm sort of coming to this realization of, wait a minute, though, you have all this access and knowledge and like skills, and that's your own people. You're not going to bring it back. Like, hold on. And then so it's like finding that place of, okay, how do you partner with the people who are most impacted while acknowledging, sure, your privilege and your access, but also bringing those skills in like really thoughtful, true, like shared decision-making power with those communities. So that's just like a little of my journey as I self-identify as an average human who gets to do cool work.
Thank you for that powerful story share. I honestly want to just kind of open up the floor to more of that. I think sharing our own stories of how we have engaged with people and just shown up and built exactly what you talked about, safe and specific spaces that allow us to understand and then work with people to meet needs, right? I just wonder if there's more stories like that you want to share or examples you can share from your own lived experience or others you've worked with of seeing this kind of impact.
I would love to jump in. I'm not going to talk long. I'm the person in the middle of the norms of like pushing myself to talk a bit more. But today, what you all have said in just this short time, I experienced twice today. I had a colleague who we talked about language in the breakout, and I had a colleague who had a problem with a decision I made around language because I am of the philosophy to get them in the door at all costs. And if outwardly I need to say something that doesn't cause our educators to get in trouble, I will, because I do not care what you call it. I care that you do it. And this person had a strong feeling about a decision that was made, but didn't understand the full scope of this decision and didn't recognize that the decision was made by a group of BIPOC people. And this person is also BIPOC. And so they used the language of all lives matter is what we were trying to say in this definition of the work we do. And I was offended. And then I had to run behind the damage of what they did, which wasn't true and it wasn't curious. And so I was in a hurricane mode for about a couple of weeks. And so we had our check-in today. And, they explained their case. They apologized for their impact. But I had to let them know that at a time where we are being attacked so much in this moment, the last thing I want to be is attacked with my colleague and my coworker. And I said, sometimes, we want to keep it so real. I said, but I don't want to be in the unemployment line. And I also don't want our work to be shelved and our students and educators then don't benefit from it. And so for me, there is a tension for sure and a balance, but I will never lessen the impact. And so where was the curiosity of that? Where was the mutual respect of the work we're trying to do and the trust of the work we're trying to do? So that was one situation. I asked them to do a couple of skills building things. And I said, one is, do you want to open the door to the conversation, or were you closing the door to judgment? You had a belief about what was made, the decision that was made, and you ran with it. And that was your narrative. And then you created the narrative for my peers. And then I had to try to run behind and say, no, wait, that's not what I want. I built this reputation and I stand on business. So I didn't understand that. But I was curious too after I calmed down and saw their face, and I am an empath, so I don't like to see people scared to talk to me. So I was like, let's just talk. And it wound up being a powerful connection. And I hope a moment of learning for them. But then they let me know that they often feel dismissed in those spaces because they don't have the positionality in that space. So I told them, I am in rooms you're not in, and I take your voice every time. I said, so when you say dismiss, what does that look like? I need practical tips so I could be specific with our chief officer. So that's something that I'm sitting with. And then lastly, I had a conversation with my team because and it's really talking about what I believe Dr. Powell just was talking about. And it's like, I don't want to be the kind of leader where I tell you what to do, you do it. It's transactional. I am people centered. And so for me, it was like, well, I'm not going to tell you what your next step is because you are hired. You know what you're doing. You have a job duty and competency. Me telling you what to do is me being a micromanager. And I come from micromanagement in another office. And so I didn't want to do that to my staff. And so I said, but what I realized is that by not doing that, I had a group of doers who were ready to do, and I didn't give them any directive. And so I had to sit on that tension and that assumption that I made. But I also shared with them, like, I believe in building together and I lead collectively and collaboratively. And so I told them, I said, while I will step up and be more direct with you, I have the quote that I love from Bossy Pants, which is you hire good people and you get out their way. I said, so once I set the parameters, I'm out of here. You tell me how you're doing. I'll make sure I'm checking on you, make sure you feel supported. But this is a moment with all of this that we lock arms and we don't look to others, including your leaders, to do it all. This is collective and we are fighting a greater enemy in many cases. And so I just hope that in both of those conversations with my team and with my other colleague, that they heard me in this, not just my position and not just what we're trying to do with our educators and internally as a staff, but you hear a people leader who's saying what I need from other people who are leaders. And so those were the moments that I came into this space with. And so I'm full, literally, I am full from all of today.
Thank you, Pam. I feel full also from listening to these discussions, and I appreciate you sharing these experiences because I think, yeah, we can relate in many ways to this affront that we're all dealing with, and yet we're still dealing with a lot of divisiveness within our own spaces. And I think, I deeply believe that collaboration is the way forward. No person and no group has the answer, and the more infighting and divisiveness, the farther away we get from that. We didn't get through all of our questions, but I wanted to just give the panelists one last opportunity to share if there is any specific strategies that you want to uplift around, again, engaging community and working together, perhaps to hold our systems accountable, to engage with them and ask for and demand what our communities need and to address the harm that's happening. Or if there's anything else, just as far as skill building and strategies that you have witnessed that you think should be named, that we all should be, again, just kind of embodying and thinking about as we move into our spaces.
If I could jump in, I would say one of the more effective tools that I've seen and also participated in is community mapping. I don't know if folks are familiar with it, but basically a collaborative process where folks map out different things like key players, resources, barriers, power dynamics in the community. And in that process, you identify like allies, gatekeepers, and even pressure points by making what seems like complex systems very visible and strategic so that you have a visual, but also like a way of moving forward. And that can lead to seeing how and where decisions are being made and who to engage and where to apply pressure. And it reveals assets within the community that you may not have known were there, as also a way to get trusted leaders, as well as gathering spaces for the community, and also just altogether strengthen efforts. So I think it's a great practical tool in terms of like, what do we do next? And how do we make things that are intuitive and somatic to us, but like visible and actionable? And I think it's a great tool.
I'm trying to keep track of like who's panelist for panel 2 is, because I want to be mindful of taking up space. Is there anybody from panel 2 who hasn't gotten to share yet? It's like my eyes are trying to scan.
I don't know if I'm on panel 2. My picture is up there. I'm happy to contribute. Um, that's probably my fault. But I think the only you guys just named so many really great strategies that I can appreciate. Um, this one is more so a reflection of the question that we keep coming back to of like taking care of ourselves and making sure that we get rest. A very real strategy to not get overwhelmed is to really decide where you want to contribute. Because if you're anything like me, there's 3 million ways I want to contribute. I'm like, this is important and this is important, and I like this organization, and what about this? And that makes it really easy to get overwhelmed. Or even if you look at the news, one thing happens and another thing happens and another, and you're like, what can I do about all of these things? And so, heard on a podcast about an advocacy worker named Daniel Hunter, and he has all of these really great resources for how to organize. And one of the very important things that he said is decide what your path is, what your role is. And he gave really great examples. One being you can protect people by harm reduction, protecting targeted people, those of us who work with vulnerable populations. That's your path, that's your lane. Some people defend civic institutions. We work from the inside, as was mentioned earlier. You know, we belong to big corporations or, you know, the Justice Department, the federal government. And so we have to figure out how to dismantle it from the inside. And so that's our role. For some people, it's about disrupting and disobeying. Like we have to create the resistance to recognize that to break our systems, right? Like we have to strategize to support. And then for other people, it's about building alternatives. So what is the future going to look like once we break the system? We can't break it and then have no plan for how to go forward. And so in this article, he gives this story about not always fitting cleanly into a box, but finding your way. So there was a story of a person who didn't quite know how to help in the Holocaust, but he knew he was a florist and he knew that there were people hiding under the floor in a house that was near a cemetery. And so his role in the movement was passing messages back and forth using his floral bouquets that were going to the graveyard, the gravesite. So it was literally inventing a path of how can I help? How can I resist using what I have? And so I think it's really important to have us focused so that we can all do our different work. Don't get distracted.
Yeah, I
I'm very
can share
excited.
maybe. Oh,
No,
no, go
please go
ahead.
ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to share like 2 quick examples because I was preparing for today and then I had a cool meeting yesterday where someone like gave me an answer to one of these questions and I was like, can I share this tomorrow? So I was meeting with a colleague who I met in a similar space to this, and we were just doing like, hey, we should connect. And so we finally connected yesterday. Her name is Keisha Preston, and she gave me permission to share today. But she publicly shares that she's a survivor of domestic violence. And we were talking about like her consulting work. And I was like, why do I think you do policy work? Why is that in my brain? And she's like, well, I don't technically do policy work, but I did write a bill. I was like, what? Excuse me? And I was like, wait, did it pass? Like, not that that is required, but and she was like, yeah, it passed unanimously in Virginia. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? But like, it was just one of those moments where I'm like, people are doing this work. And a lot of times, if you do come from a marginalized, like, or currently like oppressed community, you don't give yourself credit for it. And that's not like shade to her. I was just like, you're amazing. But her bill was on debt relief for survivors because she had extreme credit issues as a result of her abuse, which is like the most common form. Like we know the data, right? Like financial abuse is true across the majority of all forms of abuse. And she literally just did it like on her own. She like called a legislator, set up a meeting, made her pitch, and then they wrote the bill together and then it got passed. And she was like, well, I don't say I do policy work because I just like, I didn't do it formally under a nonprofit or anything. And I was like, that is the coolest thing in the world. Like, I didn't even know that's possible. So I just wanted to like share that as an example. And then I think the other thing is like, I love the arts for social change. Like, I have some colleagues who they're survivors who did a documentary on other survivors who passed a bill in New York to take into account your survivorship for if you're facing charges for homicide and self-defense. And it passed. So as a result, now there's like multiple survivors who've been released after like 20 plus years being incarcerated for killing their abusers in self-defense. So cool. That whole bill, DVSJA, Domestic Violence Survivors Justice Act, like was written and created by survivors who were incarcerated and they like wrote it in jail. But then what's cool is my colleagues, that's not what they do. They're documentary makers. So they use their skills doing that to uplift the other survivors' work and like amplify that nationally. And I don't make documentary films, but I got to support the film team in creating a program that was sustainable for them to then go into prisons and create videos as testimony for early release for survivors who are incarcerated for killing their abusers, because sometimes it's hard to tell your story in front of like a panel that's judging you. But if like you and your family can be part of this survivor-led creating of a film for you, and then you show the film. So they've also had several survivors now released as a result of their videos being part of their testimony. So just like that kind of like community village, using our skills in all our different ways to make change. So just wanted to share those examples.
Thank you for sharing those examples. I'm sorry I cut you off for a second. I was jumping in for time, and I'm so glad you talked and shared those. Those are uplifting. That's exactly what I think we need to be reminded of, right? Like we live in issue and we work together and find our place in uplifting that. And I was excited about some of what was shared previously and thinking about innovating those spaces, right? Because I think that's exactly what we're living in. Like we have so much to go off of from our ancestors and the work for revolution and freedom and change that we have experienced in the past. And yet we are living in a brand new moment that no matter how much you understand economics, trade wars, any of these visceral things that are happening, it's still happening in a new way while repeating history. And so there's so much space for each of us to like create these new ways to work together. I want to encourage you all with what kind of started some of this conversation earlier around like thinking about rest and self-care, first thinking about how we can do that in support of each other. If that's just having more conversations and creating practices, if that is accountability and follow-up and checking in, caring for each other, or if it's just continuing some of the beautiful conversations that happened today, I encourage you to pick someone or a couple people that are resonating and continue that work. My deepest hope is that we can find ways to actually start to resource share and to innovate together and to get to that place of like naming best practices that can be repeated and moving forward. So as we're ending, I want to hand over to Sabrina for a second because we want to gather your input and think about how to continue and what to continue of these conversations in the future. So Sabrina, if you want to jump in, you're welcome to.
Thank you, Yarel, and a huge, huge, huge grateful thank you to everybody who listened and shared, engaged in the chat and the breakout rooms. It's really important as we move forward for us to use the data wisely, and that way we can inform our programming and we can really tailor what it is that we're working towards so that we can suit your needs and just keep this momentum going. So as soon as you exit this Zoom room, there's going to be a pop-up survey, and there's roughly, I think, 6 questions or so, through like a couple of short answers and a couple of multiple choice questions. Please take some time to fill that out very briefly. And then there will be a Google survey that we share with you more than likely early next week. Probably won't get to that tomorrow, in full honesty. But that Google survey will also kind of have some of those similar questions. And the idea is for us to just collate all of that data and then use that to inform future forums and other initiatives. So thank you again for your feedback, because it is extremely valuable. And we want to make sure that your voices are in the room. So thank you. That's all.
Thank you, everyone. I see you sharing LinkedIn. That's awesome. If you want to share other contact information, please do. Also, just a reminder, that document that we shared with you, and we will email it as well, that also has all of your names, contact information, a little bit more information about what each of you are doing in the world and the impacts you're making. So yeah, grab that person's name, but know that we will follow up and help you make as easy as possible to stay connected, and let us know if we can support you in that. I look forward to hopefully building a relationship with each of you. I thank you so much for being here. Please invite all of us to more of these types of engagements so that we can continue to make impact together. And I hope to connect soon.
Thank you.
Wishing you all a lovely Thursday evening.
Bye.